Okay, so welcome everyone. My name is Brianna McWilliam, and if you're here, you have most likely purchased a course or had a consultation with me at some point. Today, we're going to go for about 30 minutes, and we're going to be answering three pre-submitted questions that come up around the theme of communication. So our first question is, how do I express a need without sounding too demanding? Secondly, what do I say when someone pulls away and I feel anxious? And thirdly, how can I set a boundary without creating distance or conflict? So if you have ever found yourself wanting to speak up, but feeling afraid that maybe you're going to sound too needy, or you're going to be perceived as demanding or controlling, intense, dramatic, or like you're asking for too much, then this is a segment for you. And first, we're going to talk about how do we express needs in a way that is clear, grounded, and connected without making ourselves wrong for having them. Secondly, we're going to learn what to say when someone pulls away and how the attachment system gets activated so that we know we are responding from a place of self-respect and integrity instead of panic or collapse. And last, learning how to set a boundary in such a way that we are protecting our emotional well-being without turning it into some kind of demand or ultimatum. Because if our goal is to communicate in an increasingly authentic and secure way, it's not about saying everything perfectly. It's about remaining rooted in our power and connected to ourselves while creating the best possibility for connection with someone else. So let's dive into our first question. How do I express a need without sounding too demanding? So I think that this is really such an important question because the fear is not just, how do I say this correctly? Usually there's a deeper fear that says, well, what if my need makes me less lovable? What if asking for something pushes them away? What if I come across as too much? Does this make me selfish? And this is where we want to make some important distinctions because having a need is not the same thing as making a demand. So a need we will define here as an honest expression of what would help you to feel safe, to feel loved, to feel respected, to feel connected, or just emotionally secure. That kind of need, let's say a grounded need, might sound like, I feel more connected when we have a plan to see each other. Whereas a demand might sound like, if you really cared about me, then you'd already make plans. A grounded need might sound like, I need more direct communication when something changes. Whereas a demand might sound like, you have to text me back immediately or this isn't going to work. So when we're expressing our needs from a grounded place, there's an opening, right? There's an invitation. Whereas if we are demanding from a place of fear or pressure, that creates a sense of obligation. And really what we're saying is that the energy behind what we are communicating is really important because sometimes the energy that we're carrying is still communicating on a nonverbal and even an unconscious level. Prove to me that I'm lovable. Take away my anxiety. Make me feel secure so I don't have to sit with this discomfort anymore. And we have all been there. It doesn't mean that we're doing something wrong. But what it is cluing us into is that there may be a younger aspect of us that's reaching for safety in the only way that it knew how. But now it's likely, if this is causing trouble in your relationships, that as adults, those coping skills, or we might say those strengths at the time, are no longer working to our benefit. And so if we're going to communicate from a more secure and authentic place, that asks us to pause and take a moment to come back to ourselves first. So before we express a need, we do want to pause and do a little self-inventory. So what am I actually asking for here? Not just what do I want them to do for me? What feeling am I seeking to create? So for example, maybe you think the need is they need to text me more. But when we slow down, we realize that there's something deeper underneath that, which is I need to feel considered. I need to feel like I'm being included. I need to feel like I'm not the only one holding the emotional weight of this connection. And that's actually a deeper and different conversation because now you're just seeking after a behavior. You're expressing the emotional meaning underneath the behavior. And this is where boundaries and needs get really interwoven because a boundary defines your preferences by helping you to understand your own values and priorities around what you really need. And just taking a moment to reflect on that can bring us back to our adult self, even if we have an inner child that's been activated. So this leads us to the next question. What do I say when someone pulls away and I feel anxious? Mm-hmm. This question is so tender because when somebody pulls away, especially if we are an open-hearted or someone who has an anxious attachment pattern, it usually feels like more than just distance. It can feel dangerous. It can feel like abandonment or impending rejection. Sometimes it feels like it is a determination of our worth. And so the body starts to become mobilized. Our mind and our thought may start racing. Something's wrong. I need to fix this now. I need to close the gap between us before I lose them. And you are someone who quells that by reaching for connection. You may impulsively send a text that says something like, "Are you mad at me? Why are you being weird? I guess you don't care. Forget it. I knew this would happen." Or maybe we write a very lengthy message, kind of over explaining how we feel, hoping that the perfect combination of words is going to make them understand. And if they only understood, then that would bring them closer. Right. So we're trying to kind of fill up the gap between us with words because that feels a little bit like regaining some of the control when really we may start to feel helpless. So we can get caught in a cycle when this happens where we feel like we're always reaching and they're always pulling back. Now, sometimes I call that the anxious avoidant trap, but sometimes it also happens if we have someone who's more of what I call a spice of lifer or a disorganized or fearful avoidant person, and they are paired with an anxious or an avoidant person, there can be a push-pull and a back and forth. So if we have a partner that is more of a disorganized attachment style, they may be the anxious one until their partner starts giving back a little bit more, and then that starts to feel threatening. So now they start pulling away. So this is where we start having a push-pull occur. We wind up polarizing our partner to the other end of the spectrum. So in this case, this is where soft communication strategies become really helpful. So if you are someone who feels anxious about a partner pulling away, when we use soft strategies, we are emphasizing appreciation, autonomy, and we are making choices. So for instance, instead of saying, "Why are you pulling away from me?" because there are certain layers of assumptions there, you can say, "I noticed you did XYZ, and that makes me think you want some space. I totally respect whatever it is that you need, but it's also important to me that we stay connected. So can you give me a time and date when we'll check in later?" So you are respecting their autonomy. You are also articulating your need. You're offering some structure, and you are giving them a way to meet you where you're at while still giving them what they need in the moment. So we can honor space without abandoning ourselves. Because when someone pulls away and we feel particularly anxious or mobilized, we usually think there's one of two options, and that is chase them and get the reassurance we need, or shut down, detach, and pretend like we don't care. But when we're able to operate from a secure place using things like soft strategies, it allows us to stay calm, to stay clear, and to be self-honoring. Now, of course, if the person is not willing to meet you on that level, they're not ready to meet you where you're at, because that's a perfectly reasonable and normal request. And you want a partner that is interested in alleviating your anxiety or helping to alleviate your anxiety while they are still getting what they feel like they need to stay in it. Because oftentimes when we have a rolling stone attachment, there is the space that they take sometimes is in service of sustaining the connection. Because if they're feeling overwhelmed, they are worried that their overwhelmment may overtake them and they may do or say something that they regret, and or it will push them past a certain threshold and they won't feel like they can stay connected to the relationship and remain an autonomous human being. So if the space that they are taking is to process and digest and then come back and keep going, it's in service of the connection. Now, they can also take space as a way to detach, find relief, avoid what came up, and reset the relationship back a few steps, because that feels like it creates a safer proximity, meaning they're usually better at the beginning parts of a relationship than they are in the maturing parts of a relationship. So let's say we feel the urge to reach out. Someone says they need space, and we feel the urge to reach out. Before we send that message, we might just ask ourselves, what part of me wants to send this message right now? Is it my grounded self, or is it a panicked part of me? And if it is a panicked part, we don't need to shame that part. We don't need to beat it up. We don't need to suppress it or push it away. We need to acknowledge that that part needs some care. And we can put a hand on our heart and say, this feels scary. And something inside of me is really fearful of being discarded or being left. But I don't need to abandon myself in this moment, seeking after someone else's validation or connection. So we might also just close your eyes and ask your heart, what message would protect my dignity while still extending an invitation and keeping the door open? And so whatever that message is, it is one that will reflect ultimately your personal integrity, your values and priorities in relationships, and the boundaries that you're going to uphold around that. So for instance, so the goal is really to uncover the truth of what their capacity is and what the compatibility is in the relationship. So can this person meet you in a real conversation? Can they take responsibility for the impact of their behavior? Meaning, are they willing to give you a time when they will reconnect? Can they explain what they need the space for? Do they respect you and regard your own integrity by asking for it in a clear and forward way? And can they stay connected to you and meet you halfway while still honoring their own needs? Because you also don't want to be with someone who doesn't know what their needs are and then is non-communicative about it, right? You want them to be as savvy and knowing and articulate about what they need as you are, so that you can meet in the middle. So ultimately, soft strategies are meant to express respect for someone else's authority. They ask for clarity, not control. And the goal is to create an opportunity to observe capacity, and let's call it readiness, because someone's response to your healthy communication tells you a lot. Not just that they care, but whether or not they're ready for the type of relationship that you're trying to build, and that your values and priorities really match up, right? So that brings us to the third question. How can I set a boundary without creating distance or conflict? So I would say that this question comes up a lot because a lot of people tend to associate boundaries with rejection. They think if I set a boundary, it's going to create distance. If I say no, then they're going to feel hurt or rejected. If I tell the truth, it's going to lead to a conflict. Or if I try to protect myself, then I'll lose the connection. But healthy boundaries are not meant to push people away. They create the conditions for real intimacy, because boundaries are the lines that we draw around our real needs, values, and priorities. And that invites other people to get to know the real you. So when we don't have boundaries, or our boundaries are too loose, and even when our boundaries are too rigid, we tend to slip into inauthenticity. So we start performing for love. And then maybe there's a degree of people pleasing going on, or we're doing emotional gymnastics and guessing games. And that leads to feelings of resentment, feeling unseen, feeling unacknowledged, feeling unimportant. And now one or both partners start to keep score, right? Or maybe one partner is keeping score and the other thinks that everything is just fine. And so the closeness is a false closeness. It's actually sort of masking a deeper disconnection. But when we are able to articulate our boundaries, then it's really just a simple way of saying, this is what is going to allow me to stay present and emotionally available in this connection. So it's not really a wall, it's more of a bridge. It's a guideline that you're offering someone so that they can stay in relationship with you while you remain in integrity with yourself. So we want our boundaries to be somewhat firm but flexible. So firm means that you are clear. Flexible means that you're not trying to control every detail of how the other person responds. So for instance, I want to hear your perspective, but I need us to talk in a way that is respectful. Can we try again when we're both feeling a little bit calmer? So that's very different than saying you're a terrible communicator and I refuse to talk to you about this. It basically says, I want this connection, but we also need to do it in a respectful way. So another example for expressing boundaries. I love spending time with you, and I also need time away and space to recharge. Can we plan something for the weekend instead? So this might be for the Rolling Stone who needs time and space so that they can come back and be more fully present. So that's not a boundary that rejects someone. That's a boundary that lets them know, here's how I can stay present in this. And it clarifies capacity. Now, the other thing that can kind of get us tripped up is struggling with knowing the difference between a boundary and an ultimatum. So a healthy boundary is really focused on what you will do to protect your emotional well-being. An ultimatum is focused on forcing someone else to comply. And a boundary really, it's not a true boundary unless there's a consequence. So for instance, a consequence might sound like, if this conversation continues in a dismissive tone, then I'm going to step away and come back when you can listen to me with more acknowledgement. Whereas an ultimatum might sound like, talk to me like that again and it's over. A boundary basically says, this is what I'm going to do to stay aligned with myself. An ultimatum says, you have to change so I don't have to feel this. So when you're setting a boundary, you might use a structure like, I care about this connection. You usually want to start off with some kind of appreciation. This is what I'm noticing, and this is what I need, and this is what I will do if that doesn't happen. So for example, I care about spending time with you, and I want that time to feel good for both of us. And I notice that last minute plans are really hard for me. So I need more advance notice so that I can really relax and be present. If plans are always going to be last minute, I'm not going to be available every time. Or another example, I care about being honest with you. And I notice that when I bring up something vulnerable and it gets dismissed, I shut down. I need emotional acknowledgement in this relationship. And if that's something you're not willing to practice, I'm going to reconsider how open I'm going to be here. Now, is establishing your boundaries always going to prevent distance or conflict? No, I can't promise that, because boundaries sometimes create discomfort. Sometimes boundaries reveal there is an incompatibility. Sometimes we grew up in environments where boundaries were not allowed, or boundaries were very rigid, so we didn't know how to express them while also making them an invitation. We didn't know how to express them as a guideline. Instead, we only knew how to express it as a rejection response. And so that can feel hurtful for someone who's not used to that. And it can also feel clarifying, because our goal, again, it's not to avoid conflict. It's to create an honest exchange. And sometimes an honest exchange is uncomfortable. But if we avoid the truth of something, usually that will ultimately create more distance than a clear boundary ever could. So if we come back to this question, how do I set a boundary without creating conflict? Instead, we might ask, how do I set a boundary in a way that gives us the best chance for repair and connection? That gives us the best chance for us to know each other on a whole other level. Sometimes the words do matter. If you know there are certain words that are triggers for your partner, you might be mindful of that. We've used the word need a lot in this discussion. One thing I will say, when we look at attachment-informed communication, there are certain words that are particularly emotionally laden and triggering. So need is one of those words that's particularly emotionally triggering and laden for partners that are avoidant Rolling Stones. But what I've noticed is really helpful in communicating with them is, if you ever want to use the word need, just replace it with value. So I value this. Are you able to contribute to that? I value affection and connection, and I need a certain frequency of that in our relationship. Is that something you're willing to participate in? Because for avoidant partners, needs stimulates this idea of dependency, of weakness. And a lot of times their agency is built on the idea that I don't need anything. And if we are to look at it from the avoidant partner's perspective, it may be the wrong word. Will I die without need and affection? Without affection and connection? No, but I sure do value it. And I'm willing to do what it takes to honor what I value. Will I die if I don't speak to you in the morning and the evening? No, but I sure do value it. And I'm willing to do what it takes to honor what I value. Will I die if I don't speak to you in the morning and the evening? No, No, but I sure do value consistent communication. And that allows me to feel enthusiastic and want to go deeper with this relationship. So I'm willing to do what it takes to honor what I value. So words do matter, but it doesn't have to be the perfect words. I think what's more important is that whatever energy you're carrying as you're communicating your words is coming from a grounded place rather than from a place of fear or urgency. So if I were to sort of bring this to a close, I would just say that needs are not the problem. Feeling anxious is not the problem. And boundaries are not a threat to love. All of this is important information, right? All of these are messengers, and they are signals telling you what you need to feel safe, what you need to feel loved, what you need to feel respected and truly connected. And even your anxious feelings are a kind of tenderness, letting you know where self-trust is being asked to strengthen, right? Or where you're being asked to strengthen your self-trust. Boundaries are telling you what may be required for your heart to stay open without abandoning yourself, right? So the next time you're afraid to express a need, you might try saying, I'm going to share this because I care about staying connected. The next time someone pulls away and you're anxious about it, you might say, I respect their need for space, but I would appreciate clarity about when we're going to reconnect. And the next time that you need to set a boundary, you might try saying something like, I want this connection to feel good for both of us, and this is what I need in order to stay present. So that kind of communication, it's not passive, it's not controlling, it's not cold. It is clear, it is loving, and it's respectful of everyone involved. And so when you practice that, this is what gives your relationships a chance to be more honest. And even if they respond in a way you didn't anticipate or that you didn't want, that doesn't mean you did it wrong. It just means that you're learning more about their capacity and the compatibility of the relationship. So if you want to learn more about this stuff, this is exactly the type of thing I talk about and teach in my course, The Courageous Communicator. And it's a course that follows a framework that I call the HIP framework, HIP formula, which is heal, inspire, and practice. So in that particular framework, we look at communication as first stemming from what are our conflict patterns? What have we learned? How have we habitually learned to approach things like conflict and emotional confusion in relationships? And we first do a self-inventory to see where we are creating or where our patterns may be perpetuating conflict and how we might throw a wrench in that. The inspire part is looking at attachment-informed communication strategies. So this is how now do we approach ourselves and our partners with compassion, with curiosity, and using things like soft strategies and also safe strategies, which we didn't get too much into in this discussion. But soft strategies working better with folks leaning avoidant, safe strategies working better with folks leaning anxious. And then we also look at how do we know when the communications have become toxic, when it has gone beyond repairable and it has moved into the realms of unacceptable and or abusive. And then in the third part, it's about practice and application. So this is all about how do we formulate those healthy boundaries? Knowing where I begin and someone else ends, understanding what's the extent of my accountability here and what are they truly responsible for? Understanding the degrees of emotional influence that we all share in relationship. And then, so those are our themes. And then layered on top of that, we have the experiential practices. So I'm an art therapist. So these are art-based interventions and also guided practices, because communication is not just the words that we speak. It's the energy that we carry when we speak those words. It is the emotional experience that we're trying to communicate, and that of which the words are just our best attempt to express that. So if you want to learn more about that, I will share a link to that in the replay, the email and the replay that I will send out with this. We're going to be doing, I am making a special offer if you want to sign up in the next couple of weeks. So there'll be a coupon code if you're interested. So I hope that that was helpful. I'm going to pause here, and just if there are any questions or anything from those of you that are joining me here live, please feel free to share that in the chat. Angela, I may have worded it differently, but when I switched to saying I need or I feel, he said it's all about you and said I was being selfish. Yeah. So in traditional, like sort of psychotherapeutic intervention, people say you have to learn I feel statements. But if you have a partner who grew up in an emotionally enmeshed or oppressive environment, anytime you say, I feel, you're automatically demanding. It's a threat because emotions were crowded out. Whoever they grew up around, their feelings were the only feelings that were allowed. So anytime they say, I feel, or anytime you say, I feel, they're like, oh, now you're trying to bully me, because that's, in their experience, feelings were used to bully. So that's why I would say, I would say that with avoidant partners, there is a little bit of education that has to go on around feelings are allowed. And the way that you experienced feelings in the past was a form of emotional bullying. And so now your severe reaction to that is a protective mechanism. And we have to honor that. That was probably the most functional way to be in a dysfunctional environment. So now there has to be some psychoeducation around needing to relearn what feelings really are and how we can share feelings without being closing up or being pushed out, right? What if anxious partner says something like, I feel you are being dismissive? So that's not a real feeling statement. It's an evaluation of someone else's behavior. So if you feel they are being dismissive, what's your feeling? So someone's being dismissive to you. How do you feel? Not dismissed. You're just repeating the behavior. What's the feeling? So the words that you are using are leaving me feeling disconnected from you and alone. And in this disconnected and alone feeling, this lonely feeling, it's hard for me to find a sense of acknowledgement. And that makes me question my power, my influence, and my value in this relationship. And the words that inspire those feelings in me are when you said XYZ. If instead you had said ABC, I think I might have felt more connected to you. So rather than saying you're being dismissive, use your emotional response to demonstrate the consequence of that behavior. You can use I feel statements, but this is where I think using the term values is really more useful. So for instance, I'll go back to the examples that I shared. So you might say, well, give me an example. What's an I feel statement that you shared that they didn't have a positive response to? Because honestly, I lean more avoidant than I do anxious. And that's because I grew up in an emotionally crowded house. So anytime the words I feel came out, it was always like, oh, because it was always coming from a victimized place. And everyone was a perpetrator, including young kids who have big energy. So, I got a lot of mixed messages like, I feel this, I feel that. And then what do you feel? You never share your feelings. So then I would share a feeling and then I'd be punished for having that feeling. So feelings, saying I feel, was another emotionally laden, treacherous, and manipulative word to use. It was a bullying word. So like I said, usually there's twofold process there. The person who experienced that needs to have some education, skill building around realizing not everybody is using that word in the same way. And also that there can be a way of communicating a little differently. Let's see. I am in a major confrontation with avoidant. I'd like to keep the connection, but I need to make it clear that's not enough for me what they are offering. Ooh, okay. So there's a lot of layers here. That's not enough for me. So that's not enough for me suggests that you've already put a lot of power in their hands to make you happy or unhappy. And that's the emotional bullying that they experienced as a child. So they're kind of reading you right a little bit here. Are you angry because they're not giving you what you want and therefore it's not enough for me and I need to get out of this? So why are you still there? So what you want to say is, in relationships, my highest priority is XYZ. And I value that because when that is present, I feel more deeply connected. And that connected feeling is what makes relationships worth it to me. When XYZ is not present, I feel as though I am acting out of integrity with what I really value and want in relationship. And as much as I love you, and as much as I do like and appreciate when you have XYZ, because I wouldn't be in this if I didn't think you had done it at some point, even if inconsistently, when that is present, I have felt tremendous love and connection with you, right? But I have to acknowledge that I am living in the present moment and the past has come and gone. And unless I am being met in this way, I am going to take a step back so that I can live in integrity with my own values and priorities. So there is an invitation for you to meet me there. And these are the things that I value and prioritize. And you are invited to meet me there. But if you feel that you cannot, I accept that too. And I will withdraw my emotional investment. And that is going to look like XYZ. Anger comes up when you're pushing something, when you're trying to control something that's beyond your control. Got to let go. It also comes up when we're trying to self-advocate. So you have to look at how much of the anger is really towards them and how much of the anger is really towards myself for hanging on to something that I know isn't working. And because I'm hanging on to something that I know isn't working, I'm out of integrity with my own values and priorities. Usually that's what we mean when we say it's not enough. So what's your contribution to that? Now, that's not to say that other people don't impact us. Of course they do. Of course they do. Other people's behaviors, they do impact us. Other people can inspire us. They can offer assistance. They can participate in our emotional experiences. And then we have a choice to decide how much of that we are going to allow or disallow. So if you've been allowing things outside of what you really value and want, that's the thing that you have to sort of look at. If I walk away, it's another loss on my list. There you go. There's another one. If I walk away, then finally I will be living in the present. If I walk away, it is a gift I am giving to myself. If I walk away, I'm not going to waste another minute being out of integrity with what I really want and value and love. And now I have become the true champion of love that I thought I was being when I was fighting for something that was not right for me. And so now I am a champion of being in the moment. I'm a champion of the love that I am making space for in my life. And loneliness is not going to be in control of my life. I'm not afraid of loneliness. Will I die if I'm lonely? No. Loneliness will connect me to my tenderness. Loneliness will allow me to connect to the parts that were too afraid to leave a situation that wasn't good for us. Loneliness gives me an opportunity to process the real deeper core wound that kept me in something that wasn't right for me for decades. Loneliness is going to be the path to my spiritual evolution, and I am here for it. And I have all the strength and capacity in the world to find all the supports I would need to navigate that lonely path so that I can find a way back to the parts of myself that I lost in this relationship and not allow loneliness to be the dictator of my experience. So bring on the loneliness, because the loneliness is going to bring me back to myself. You are at the threshold of your next evolution. You don't have to take that step. You don't have to. There's learning in that too. But if you choose to, you never know what you might open up to, what that tenderness might allow in. Oh, I'm glad that's helpful, Angela. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for joining me. I hope it was helpful. We went a little bit longer than anticipated, but these are great questions. Thank you all for joining me here live. And if you are interested in learning more about communication, I'll also share a link with a little coupon code for the Courageous Communicator. Thank you, everyone. I hope you enjoy the rest of your week.